Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. Pakistan's military has killed 3 terrorists during an intelligence-based operation in northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's province. The military's media wing says the operation on the Alim Khan Khoshali group was carried out in the Mir Ali area of North Waziristan district. It said that the terrorists were involved in the target killings, various kidnappings for ransom, attacks on security forces, and IED explosions. A complete shutdown is being observed in the Indian-occupied Kashmir against the visit of New Delhi's cherry-picked EU parliamentarians to endorse New Delhi's false narrative. All parties' Hurriyat conference called for the strike, which was supported by all pro-freedom leaders and organizations. The EU Disinfo Lab has revealed that a 2019 visit of a largely right-wing MEPs was part of India's propaganda campaign against Pakistan. The United Nations has warned of a potential escalation of violence in Myanmar. UN Special Envoy Tom Andrews' warning comes after deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi was slapped with an additional charge. Meanwhile, the opponents of the coup have called for bigger protests today to end the military rule. 21 people have died after a historic winter storm swept across multiple states in the central and southern United States. The storm has left millions of people without power in Texas and Oregon. The White House says President Joe Biden has assured the federal government's assistance to the governors of the hard-hit states. The United Kingdom is set to call for a United Nations resolution to help negotiate ceasefire so that people in conflict zones can be vaccinated against COVID-19. Meanwhile, Brazil has recorded 55,000 new cases and over 1,100 deaths overnight, raising the toll over 240,000. In Pakistan, over 1,100 people tested positive and 56 more died overnight, with the death toll reaching 12,436. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected over 109 million. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Pakistan's military has killed 3 terrorists during an intelligence-based operation in the northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing says that the operation on the Alim Khan Khoshali group was carried out in the Mir Ali area of North Waziristan district. It said that the terrorists were involved in target killings, kidnapping for ransom, attacks on security forces, and IED explosions. The Inter-Services Public Relations says the area is now being combed to find any terrorists and their aides. A complete shutdown is being observed in the Indian-occupied Kashmir against the visit of New Delhi's cherry-picked EU parliamentarians to endorse New Delhi's false narrative. All parties' Hurriyat conference called for the strike, which was supported by all pro-freedom leaders and organizations. In 2019, a similar visit by largely right-wing MEPs sparked widespread outrage from locals and politicians after they were barred from meeting them. The EU Disinfo Lab has revealed that the visit was part of India's propaganda campaign against Pakistan. Pakistan's Foreign Secretary Sohail Mahmood says Indian attempts to alter occupied Kashmir's demography posed a threat to regional peace. Briefing the heads of diplomatic missions in Islamabad, he condemned the systemic human rights violations in Indian-occupied Valley. The Foreign Secretary urged the international community to facilitate efforts for peaceful resolution of the Kashmir dispute. Kashmir has been under India's inhumane curfew since August last year. In India, authorities have seized the properties of the human rights group Amnesty International over money laundering charges. The properties are worth $2 million. In a statement, the Enforcement Directorate said Amnesty violated the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. It said that the rights group and others have obtained foreign remittances under the guise of foreign direct investments. Terming the allegations baseless, the Amnesty said New Delhi's action had forced them to lay off its Indian staff. Amnesty halted work in India in September, accusing the government of punishing the group for speaking against the alleged rights abuses. The Taliban have urged the United States to abide by the last year Doha deal and ensure the troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. Taliban's deputy chief, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, says it is the responsibility and in the interest of all to bring an end to this war. Baradar said that the Taliban believe the United States and its allies have also concluded that the Afghan conflict can only be resolved through dialogue. In an open letter, he wrote the Afghans themselves can establish the government through intra-Afghan dialogue. His letter comes on the eve of a NATO key teleconference that could decide the fate of its military mission in Afghanistan. Earlier, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the Taliban must do more to fulfill their commitments under the Doha deal. The United States committed to withdrawing 12,000 troops within 14 months under the agreement signed last year. New Zealand says it will withdraw its last remaining troops from Afghanistan by May. The exit will conclude the country's longest-running deployment of military personnel, which has lasted 2 decades. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said New Zealand had deployed more than 3,000 troops to Afghanistan since the United States invasion. In a statement, she said 10 of the New Zealanders have been killed since then in the line of duty. She said Afghanistan's internal peace process represented the best prospect for a political solution in the troubled country. Foreign Affairs Minister Naina Mahuta said that New Zealand will continue to support the Afghan government through the peace process. In France, the lower house of the parliament has passed a so-called anti-separatism bill put forward by President Emmanuel Macron's government. The bill will strengthen government oversight of mosques and religious schools, among other measures. Human rights groups say that the bill unfairly targets the country's 5.7 Muslim minority population. Critics call the bill a political maneuver by Macron to win support from the conservative votes ahead of next year's presidential election. The incidents of Islamophobia have significantly risen in Europe, promoting concerns of the Muslim world, including Pakistan and Turkey. The United Nations has warned of a potential escalation of violence in Myanmar. United Nations Special Envoy Tom Andrews' warning comes after deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi was slapped with an additional charge. Andrew made an urgent call on any country with influence over the generals and businesses to press them to avoid it. Meanwhile, the opponents of the coup have called for bigger protests today to end the military rule. They say the military's claim of holding new elections is false. The army detained Suu Kyi on the 1st of February coup, and her next hearing is set for the 1st of March. She now faces a charge of violating a natural disaster management law, as well as charges of illegally importing 6 walkie-talkie radios. 21 people have died after a historic winter storm swept across multiple states in and central in the southern United States. The deaths were reported in Texas, Louisiana, Kentucky, and Missouri. Authorities say the storm is not expected to relent until the weekend. The storm has left millions without the power and in Texas and Oregon. Officials drew criticism as the state's energy grid repeatedly failed, forcing rolling blackouts. The National Weather Service says over 150 million Americans are now under winter storm warnings. Meanwhile, the White House says President Joe Biden has assured the federal government's assistance to the governors of the hard-hit states. Brazil has recorded 55,000 new COVID-19 cases and over 1,100 deaths overnight, raising the total over 240,000. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected over 109 million people. While the World Health Organization notes a 16% decrease in the emergency of new COVID-19 cases, the end of the pandemic is a distant reality, especially considering the setbacks in vaccination campaigns and the spread of new variants. The United States has witnessed a drop in new cases and reduced hospitalizations for the 5th week in a row. Meanwhile, more than 55 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine have been administered in the United States. The Mexican government has decided to raise concerns at the United Nations over unequal vaccine access as the country tops 2 million infections.
Tomorrow in the Security Council, we are going to present Mexico and Latin America's position in regards to the inequality, the lack of fairness when it comes to vaccine access. The countries that produce vaccines have very high vaccination rates, and Latin America and the Caribbean much less. We are going to bring this to the Security Council tomorrow because it is not fair.
The United Kingdom is also set to call for a United Nations resolution to help negotiate ceasefires so that people in conflict zones can be vaccinated. Europe's drug regulator authority announced to issue verdict over Johnson & Johnson vaccine by mid-March. Meanwhile, Dutch Prime Minister has called on the nation to respect a nighttime curfew despite a court ruling that the measure lacked a legal basis.
The aim is to control the coronavirus as much as possible so that soon we will have all our freedoms back, but in a safe way. That is why we introduced the curfew, and that is not changed today. That is why I urge everyone to keep following the SOPs should our appeal not result in a suspension of the ruling of the district court.
South Africa says it will offer its doses of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine to the African Union after scrapping their use due to efficacy concerns. South Korean authorities warned against loosening enforcement of SOPs after the number of new cases hit the highest levels in nearly 40 days. While in Pakistan, 56 more people have died of COVID-19, while over 1,000 tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the country's death toll has climbed to 12,436. The ministry said that the tally of nationwide infections has reached nearly 566,000, of which 528,000 people have recovered. Meanwhile, the number of active COVID-19 cases in the country has dropped to 25,000. The ministry said over 1,600 patients are in critical condition. Pakistan's foreign minister has urged the Egyptian companies to benefit from the ample investment opportunities in Pakistan. On his two-day official visit to Cairo, Shah Mahmood Qureshi assured the Egyptian investors of every possible cooperation by Islamabad. Talking to a delegation of businessmen, Qureshi said both countries should further enhance their bilateral trade. The minister noted that Pakistan's improved ease of doing business rating depicts the confidence of the international community. Meanwhile, the Egyptian companies expressed their interest in investment in Pakistan's healthcare, energy, and construction sectors. Egyptian company Al-Saudi Electric CEO also called on the foreign minister and showed interest to invest in Pakistan. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and his Swiss counterpart Guy Parmelin have discussed ways to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. Rouhani told Parmelin in the latest developments on a phone call. In a statement, the Iranian president's office said both leaders exchanged views on Swiss humanitarian trade arrangement and regional security. Meanwhile, in a tweet, Parmelin said that he also discussed Switzerland's mandate to provide good offices for Iran and the United States. The United States says the path to diplomacy is open right now with Iran over 2015 nuclear deal. But the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Iran is still far away from compliance with the deal. Talking to National Public Radio, Blinken said Iran resumes compliance with the JCPOA and the United States would do too. He added many presumable future engagement with Tehran will require diplomacy. The Secretary of State did not address whether the new U.S. administration has had any direct engagement with Iranian officials as yet. This comes after Iran told the United Nations nuclear watchdog it will scale back cooperation within a week. The United States says it is planning to recalibrate its relations with Saudi Arabia. This represents an abrupt change in the U.S. policy from President Joe Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump. Talking to reporters, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Biden is returning to counterpart engagement. Psaki said that the president will communicate through King Salman bin Abdulaziz as the United States president's counterpart. He said that the two leaders will have a conversation at an appropriate time, and Washington will work with Riyadh while highlighting areas of disagreement and concern.
We've made clear from the beginning that we're going to recalibrate our relationship with Saudi Arabia, and that President Biden, and one of the questions there was also, just to go back to the context of it, whether he would be speaking with MBS. And part of that is going back to engagement counterpart to counterpart. The president's counterpart is King Salman.
The United States says it believes Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project is a bad deal for Europe. This comes amid Biden administration's review of the gas pipeline project from Russia to Germany. Talking to reporters, White House spokesperson Jen Psaki said Washington will determine if sanctions are in order to stop the project. Psaki said that the pipeline will divide Europe and expose Ukraine and Central Europe to Russian manipulation. She added the project goes against Europe's own stated energy and security goals.
Well, our position on Nord Stream 2 has been very clear, and it remains unchanged. President Biden has made clear that Nord Stream 2 is a bad deal. It's a bad deal because it divides Europe, it exposes Ukraine and Central Europe to Russian manipulation, and because it goes against Europe's own stated energy and security goals. We're continuing to monitor activity to complete or to certify the pipeline.
Meanwhile, Russian state gas company Gazprom is racing to complete the $11 billion project this year. Now moving on, United Nations Special Envoy for Libya Jens Kubis has arrived in Tripoli on his first visit to the country after the appointment. In a statement, the United Nations mission said Kubis met several officials and stakeholders from the Libyan factions. They said that the officials discussed the successful outcome of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum in Switzerland. The delegates spoke about the importance of full implementation of the roadmap, including a smooth transition of power. Meanwhile, the Turkish ambassador to Libya also hosted Kubis at their embassy in Tripoli. The Turkish envoy affirmed Ankara's full support for the United Nations mission to ensure stability and approval of the new Libyan government. In Algeria, thousands of people have demonstrated in the northern Kherata town of Voice to support their Hirak protest movement. The Hirak had ousted veteran former President Abdulaziz Bouteflika in 2019. Chanting anti-military slogans, more than 5,000 protesters called for the revival of Hirak movement. The protesters said that they gathered for the independence of Algeria and for the rule of law. The protest was held to mark the second anniversary of the start of demonstrations in Kherata before spreading across the country. The Hirak movement demanded complete removal of Algeria's entrenched political elite. Pakistani mountaineer Asad Ali Memon has become the first Asian to summit Mount Kilimanjaro within 24 hours in Tanzania, Africa. Pakistan's envoy to Tanzania, Mohammed Salim, congratulated Memon on his historic achievement. Mount Kilimanjaro is the third mountain of Asad's 7th summit challenge. He has already climbed Russia's Mount Elbrus and Argentine's Mount Aconcagua, the highest peak in the American region. Standing tall at 5,895 meters, it takes 5 to 7 days to reach the mountain's peak. In the underserved New York City neighborhood of South Jamaica in Queens, a Peace Mobile has become a symbol of pride. It is the idea of activist Erica Ford, who has been working to end gun violence in the city for over 30 years. Ford founded Life Camp in 2002. which stands for Love Ignites Freedom Through Education. She says its mission is to prevent gun violence by mediating conflict and offering mental and wellness services to the community. Ford says the van has become a source of energy for the residents.
The Peace Mobile, as you can see, is a 35-foot beast, and it brings peace into the community. Just a big orange bus rolling into the community allows people to see something different, and it gives a burst of energy.
To break the cycle of violence, Ford said her methods are both conventional and unconventional. Conventional as the group helps provide jobs and financial literacy. Unconventional as it offers therapeutic wellness activities. Ford's methods have been emulated across the nation and have led to a reduction of gun violence in New York City.
And so if we see it very important to not only go out in the street and take the gun and stop the incident, but to help that person heal from what made them think that the gun was the resolution to the problem that they had.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, young people would gather inside the Peace Mobile for a variety of activities. But the pandemic forced an end to large in-person gatherings, and since then, Ford has used the Peace Mobile to meet other community needs. Life Camp works with Crisis Management System, which is a network of more than 60 anti-violence community groups in New York City. The European Space Agency has opened a recruitment drive starting from the 31st of March, but the applicants must be from one of the 22 member countries of the agency.
Beings have been venturing into space since October 1957, when the USSR launched the first artificial satellite into orbit Earth. But since then, not everyone has had the chance to fly to space. If you are dreaming of space travel, try your luck with the European Space Agency, which is giving a chance to aspiring astronauts for the first time in 11 years. But it won't be easy to land one of the coveted positions, as the applicants will have to undergo a rigorous 6-stage selection process.
It's a very long and it's going to be a very rigorous process indeed. It will take around 18 months, allowing for potential implications from the COVID situation, of course. So candidates do need to be mentally prepared for this process and waiting times. After each selection stage, those candidates who fulfill the requirements and criteria and will perform the best in the tests will continue.
This year, the agency is also looking to get disabled astronauts onto the space station with the help of advanced technology. The agency's last recruitment drive in 2008 drew 8,000 applications, of which only 10 reached the final selection.
It's a long process. It's certainly quite stressful. And we have to be honest, we expect and we hope that thousands of people will apply, and we are only going to select a handful. So the chances of success are slim. But I think it's a great opportunity, regardless of, whether at the end you will be selected or not. It's an amazing journey.
Human space flight looks set for a revival. After years in which the only launch site for crewed flights to space was Baikonur in Kazakhstan, cooperation with private companies like SpaceX has raised prospects for more human missions.
In Jordan, a Syrian refugee woman has come up with ways to spread happiness in the dusty lives of the inhabitants of the refugee camp.
Over 80,000 Syrian refugees live in the Zaatari refugee camp in the hot and rugged Mefrak governorate. The refugee camp is considered a temporary residence. However, the wait for settlement can be extended for years. But getting married in a refugee camp does not mean giving up on the dream wedding dress. For aspiring brides, one of the refugees, Noor, is nothing less than an oasis in their otherwise distressed lives. She started her business of wedding dresses, hairdos, and makeup for the brides of refugee camp in 2012.
When the groom comes to get the bride, it is so sweet. It makes me happy that they like my work. I feel my work is like art. If this work touches your heart, you know you have to do it.
While Noor's work spread happiness, it also helps her earn a dignified living. Her shop is one of the 500 in the camp. Like many of her clients, Mona is thrilled by her work.
I have come to choose a wedding dress as I heard about Noor's salon. The dresses are beautiful and her work is so nice.
1/3 of refugees in Jordan have lost their jobs due to the economic stresses of COVID-19. Such small businesses are the only hope of survival for some of the inhabitants of the Zatari refugee camp.
Now, stocks in Asia Pacific are trading mixed as investors monitor bonds yields following a recent rise. The Kospi in South Korea is leading the losses, sliding close to 1%. The Nikkei 225 in Japan has also slipped over 0.5%. The ASX 200 in Australia has dipped almost by 0.5% as well. But Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has gained nearly 0.5%. Markets in mainland China are closed for the Lunar Year holidays. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.